As I move, my character moves. It also rotates based off of my head rotation, and you can see it also has my player name on top of it. So how do we create this? First, you'll note that this is scaled on a 1:25 ratio, with the world being 100 from the radius, and this mini map being 4 meters from the radius. And so we divide the player's position by 25. We're also not concerned with the Y value of the player's position, so if they're at the top of the treehouse or the bottom, it's going to look the same. And you'll note that we have 4 of these. When a player spawns in, it brings itself to the minimap, and when the player leaves, it moves out of the way of the minimap. Let's go ahead and start by looking at the object. The first thing you're going to note is we have a text object at the very top. We've used these dashes to notate how long do we want it to be. I've set it to be this kind of peep-looking character figure. And we've also attached the player mini icon script. And in here, you'll note that it has player number. So you notate this is 0, 1, 2, and 3 for our 4 players, because players start at 0. And we've got our scale at 25. So if I made this map bigger and it was, say, a 1:50 scale, meaning it's 200 meters from the radius, and this is 4 meters, so that'd be a 1:50, then I would type 50 in here. We've also got our text object, which is just reference cabled in. So we can go inside of the object, and you'll see that this is connected into here. So we have a text object variable. We have our Z in motion, X in motion, scale, and player number. These are all just plain number variables. And then we have our original position, which is a vector variable. And then when the world is started, we set our original position to be the position of self. This runs on the object that we want to represent the miniature player. And then we display this string on the text object. We move to a 0, -25, 0 on self, moving it out of view. And then when the player enters the world, if that is the player of player number, so we get the index of that player to check and see if they are who that player number is, then we display the name of the player on the text object, and we move to the original position on self, and we send event myEvent to self. MyEvent is the brains of the operation. It's going to start by setting the X and Z of the player's torso divided by scale. So what it's doing is it's pulling out the X of the vector for the position of the torso on that player, and then dividing it by our scale, which is 25. So we bring it back to the center. And then we do that on our Z as well. And the reason this works is because we have set our minimap at 0, 0. If we weren't at 0, 0, what you'd want to do is use a plus sign to adjust the location of X in motion to be relative to the minimap's location. So for instance, if we divide this, we've found the position of 0, 0, and then if the minimap is moving, you just simply add the position of the minimap and it will move it relative to the minimap. Then we move to that position X in motion. We use the Y of the original position, so we keep it level with the minimap, and we grab our Z in motion, and we do that over a ½ second on self. Then we rotate to the look towards of the torsos forward of that player. If this is confusing, don't worry. It took me a second to understand what's happening here as well. So what we have here first is player number. Remember, every object saves which player it's supposed to represent. We then get that player from index using that number, so we know which player to get. Then we find out what is the forward of the torso on that player. A forward is a vector that represents which direction forward. So that vector needs to be converted into a rotation. To do that, we use look towards. Look towards then converts this torso forward into a rotation that we can then use. And then we use 0, 1, 0 to make sure it's always pointing straight up. We do that over a ½ second on self. And the reason we use torso and not head is because the head can rotate freely and look up and down. The torso just stays upright. So this means our characters are only going to rotate based off the torso, and they're not going to be looking around. After that, we send myEvent back to self with a ½ second delay. If you were going to have this as a moving mini-map, I would highly recommend changing this to be a 0.1 second delay and changing this to be a 0.1 second delay. I currently have this running at a ½ second, so I don't hit the maximum number of events that can happen per second. And then when the player exits the world, if that's the player that I am, we then display the original string on text, and then we move to that position 0, -25, 0 on self, moving it off the minimap. Oh, you know what I forgot to do? That's why this is happening. I forgot to set a cancel sending event at the very end here. So right here, it should cancel sending my event to self. It's really quite straightforward. It's amazingly simple, and there's an enormous amount of possibilities here, whether you're making a map, a maze, or any other concoction. I want to take a moment to thank John Burns. I was inspired by his mini map with a radar, and he has graciously offered to let us take a look at his script and see how he made his mini map. So let's go ahead and take a look and meet up with John. Oh, that is neat.
It has to be oriented with the map.
I would actually go a step further and take this so it only rotates half of it. So only half of it is detecting, and then the other half is just like an empty area. So you have like, an empty object at the very end. And then that way it's not picking up simultaneously both sides. It's only picking up one side. And then inside of your radar, add like a rotating element just like it. So that way you can see visually where it's at.
Eventually, we shrink it down, maybe put it on our wrist or something.
Oh yeah.
The script is up here. It's actually really short.
What I want to do first is I'm going to quickly run through your script and just kind of read it out loud so people who wanted to rebuild this can. And then what I want to do is we'll duplicate this, tracks an object, and then we'll make it so that the object tells the control object what it is. So it'll send out an event to that object, and then that object will say, hey, I'm gold. Hey, I'm ammo. Hey, I'm whatever.
That's great. Sure.
Yeah.
And then they can label it.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then you don't have to tag it into the object. It'll just figure out what it is. We have blip, which is an object. We have map scale, so we have the scale of the map, which is how much you're multiplying it by. We have label 1, which is going to be the text layer's name. Blip origin, so that's where it's going to start. We have player 1, 0, 0, 0. What are we using player 0, 0, 0 for?
Breaking out of this long line of code, actually that's what that is. I mean, you could put position of
yes.
player in.
That makes so much more
here.
sense. Our scope is the half hemisphere. At the beginning of the world, we're hiding the blip, we're hiding the label, and we're sending event sweep, which is this basic loop. And when sweep goes through, we rotate by 10, and then we send event sweep to self with sweep time. So every 10th of a second, it's going to keep sweeping. And then when event trigger enters with player is received, so when that trigger, because this is going to be running on the trigger itself, we set player 1 torso. So this is a vector that we're setting to be the torso position of that player. So then we take the X position of scope and we add to it the player 1 that we just calculated. So that's the torsos, the X of player 1, that vector. And then we multiply it by map scale. So we scale it down, and by adding it to the position of scope, that scope can move wherever it wants to go. So that's our little mini map down here. And for Y, we just use position of scope because we don't want it moving up or down, but we do set it to be up by 0.3 because the center of this needs to go up by 1/3 of a meter. And then for Z, we're going to do the exact same thing we did for X, which is getting the position of scope, adding the Z of player 1 times map scale, and this runs on the blip. We then show the blip, and we show the label, and on the label, we display the name of the player on that label, and we send event fade to self after 1 second. When fade is received, this hides the blip and hides the label until the radar goes through the player again. Absolutely brilliant. Great work, BurnBuns. This is actually really quite incredible. Like seriously, this is great.
I'm quite honored.
There's a lot of ways to do this, and I think today we should simply augment this the way you were talking about, having an object be able to register. And so if we just simply duplicate this script and we duplicate this radar, which we'll go ahead and scale up and then slide down. Okay. And then we'll go and attach our new script. And so this one will be called Object Radar. And then on our trigger, we're going to switch it to Object Radar. And Object Radar is going to work on objects tag radar. The reason we're going to tag it radar is because there could be gold, there could be ammo, whatever it is, we're going to find that out from the object. Basically keep everything the same except for it's not trigger enter with player anymore. It's now trigger is entered by object. And when the trigger is entered by object, we're simply going to send an event to that object. And this event is going to tell that object, hey, we just collided with you. Can you tell us what's going on? And so we're going to say, who are you? That's going to be the event we send to that object. And we're going to send a parameter to that object, and the parameter is going to be self. And what this does is it says, hey, object, I am this person. make sure to send it back to me. And so now that we have WhoRU set up, well, let's go create a quick script, and this is going to run on any object we need to know who they are. When WhoRU is received, and that'll be received with a object variable, and we'll call that object, we are going to send an event back to the object, and this is going to go, and so this is going to be I am, and so we're going to send event I am back to that object with a parameter, and the parameter is going to be a variable we set up, and that variable will be a string. And so this string is going to be what am I? And so let's say by default it's gold. So what this will do is it's going to send a string to our control trigger that says, hey, I'm gold. You just collided with gold. And now when event is received, I am event is received, it'll be received with a string variable, and this will be called I am string. And now we're going to drag everything from the trigger enter event into the I am event, since that is the main event. And we can now delete trigger enter. But there is one variable we need to move up into the trigger enter, and so that is our set player one. For simplicity's sake, we're going to continue calling this vector player one, but it's no longer a player. In this case, it's going to be an object. We go back to our operations tab, grab position of object, and we drag our object down into here, and now we've set our vector to be the position of the object we collided with, and almost instantaneously we know who that object is, which is the string. And so here we were displaying the name of a player, but no longer are we displaying a name of a player. We're now displaying the name of that string. So now we simply display the string on the label, so it'll say gold. And if you wanted to, you could even have a series of if statements that say, if I am string equals string gold, then change color of blip to be gold. And if it's, health, maybe it changes to white. And if it's ammo, it changes to gray. We're going to quickly add 3 if statements in here to check and see what this object is. And so we're going to go grab 3 equals signs as well. And it's going to say, if I am string equals the string. And so if we come to our values, grab string input, we can check this to see what string it is. And so we know that the string values that we can receive are going to be gold, medkit, or ammo. And if it does happen to be one of those 3 things, grab paint object. And now what we're going to do, we'll come over here and grab blip. And then we know when it's gold, we want to paint it gold. Awesome. Okay, so we've got gold set up. So we're going to set our medkit to be white, and we're going to set our ammo to be gray. So we'll just use 0.5 for gray. 1 represents white. There we go. So now we've got the color changing. We have the display changing. Tie in our scope, grab scope. Then we're going to tie in our blip. We're going to tie in our text. Now that we have those tied in, we just need to create 3 objects named radar. In the attributes, we want to label these all radar. So go ahead and tag them all radar. And then where we're going to put the name is going to be under script. You're going to call it WhoRU object. And then under WhoRU object, you'll see what am I, and we can change that to be medkit.
There's your gold nugget, sir.
Wonderful.
I found this gold nugget in a creek in the horizon.
All right, so we've got that set up. We'll go ahead and make it say interactive and grabbable, so that way the players can interact with it. And then let's go convert this into a giant bullet. So we'll go and open up the properties and change this to ammo. All right, there is our, there's our ammo pill. And so now what we want to do is space these out throughout the area. So I'm going to move ammo over here. And then if you want to move gold, oh my goodness, this is crazy. It appears to be working.
It's not exactly right because the scale's a little off.
Yeah.
Because I was ballparking that, actually.
Yeah, I'm really impressed actually for like a first.
Let's just move it over and see if it, yeah.
That's amazing. Great job.
Like, this is so much fun. Dude, love it.
But no, I love this so much. Thank you so much for letting us come in and take a look.
I am honored to have you here.
Thank you. If you took these 2 triggers and then connected them, remember how we were talking at the beginning about having an invisible object? Well, you don't have to have an invisible object, just scale them down to be half the size. And then rather than rotating self, rotate the group object only on 1. You only need to run that on 1 script. And then you have 2 radars, so it scans players on 1 half, and then it'll scan objects on the other half. And so then it's never showing up like simultaneously. This is amazing. amazing. I cannot wait to see like the FPS that come out of this, you know? Like there's gonna be so many crazy cool games. Like I'm really excited.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye!